Sup, everyone. It is Timmy B and Joey D back at it again for another episode of the Flea Flicker. Right now, we are going to be talking about the NFL draft coming up later this week with Joey D, my friend. How are you doing? How have you been?
Tim, I'm doing well. Just another day in the life of Joey D.
Mhm.
Draft coming up right around the corner. This is our favorite time of the year, Tim. But also shout out to my younger brother, John Michael, friend of the pod, graduating from
Michaels.
college. John Michael graduating from college this weekend. So we'll be driving up to West Virginia to celebrate him. So shout out JM Double D, baby.
Well, hey, shout out JM indeed. And Joe, we have a little bit of a mock draft challenge, which is very exciting. So if anybody wants to join in the mock draft challenge, just hit us up on Twitter, or if you have our numbers, hit us up that way, or just get in contact with us somehow. We'll send you all the information. Basically, it is a first round mock draft. You just need to get the position right. You need to get the player picked, and there's points based on certain things and trades as well. It's just first round. It's just a first round. So if you guys want to do participate, it's a $5 buy-in, winner take all. Last year's winner won like I think 110, 120 bucks roundabout. And last year's winner is now a two-time defending champion. So we got to take him down in year three to prevent the three-peat. But Joey D, how's your mock looking right now? I haven't even started mine yet. I'm just doing that initial research, but I'm excited to win this mock draft challenge.
Yeah, I'll probably finalize mine tomorrow. I've got some tidbits, some ideas, but waiting for some of the smoke to clear before we finalize everything and put it all down in pen on paper.
Okay. All right, and we'll hop into the draft here in just a second, and this could very well happen in the draft. But I guess some of the biggest offseason news in the past couple of weeks since we last met, just two people that could potentially be traded in the days coming up to toward the draft or even during the draft. With Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield obviously wanting out of Cleveland now that they got Deshaun Watson, wanted out beforehand when the rumor was, or that to his knowledge, it was Kirk Cousins that they were going to go get. And then Debo Samuel wants out of San Fran. So, Joe, I guess provide your thoughts on both of them, and will they be traded between now and the end of the draft on Saturday evening?
Yeah, with Baker, I think it's a tough spot. I don't think he'll be traded before the end of the draft. I mean, just looking around the league, I don't see a great fit for him, in terms of teams that need a starting quarterback that, he would be an upgrade for. I mean, the only two that really stand out to me are Carolina and Seattle, but it seems like Baker isn't as interested in going to Carolina. Carolina isn't as interested in
Neither is
Baker.
Robbie
You
Anderson.
know, Definitely, Robbie Anderson, we know for sure, does not want Baker Mayfield throwing to him. I don't know what that's all about, but it that could end up being something we see after the draft, depending on how everything goes for Carolina. And then with Seattle, kind of the same thing. I mean, they have Drew Lock. How much of an upgrade is Baker Mayfield over Drew Lock? You know, it's it's a tough situation to really kind of figure out if you're Baker Mayfield, because he definitely deserves to get out of Cleveland, but he was a former first round pick. He's still got an expensive price tag, and he's a quarterback with a lot of flaws, especially for someone being the number one overall pick. It's going to cost something for Cleveland to basically trade him to get another team to absorb his contract, kind of like the Broncos did with Brock Osweiler a couple years
Yeah.
ago,
Well,
or maybe it was the
it
Texans.
was the
Um,
Texans, and they just took the money. But yeah, I mean, I was reading something today where it was like, the Panthers might trade for Baker Mayfield, but it might be like a 2023 like second or third round. Like it wouldn't be a first rounder; it would be a next year
no,
pick. Like so, and it's just the Browns being like, well, this is the number one pick. We took him a couple of years ago, and it's like, well, it's not his value right now.
exactly. And I mean, the Browns clearly they don't think that highly of him, or they wouldn't have gone all in on Deshaun Watson. So all they did was kind of tank his value a little bit more. So I think that's a situation that could potentially drag out into training camp, and then maybe there's a QB injury, and the Browns are able to take advantage. So there could be some time, before we see some resolution there. But on the flip side with Debo Samuel and the 49ers, that seems like a situation that kind of should be resolved soon,
Hmm.
because he clearly does not want to be there. And from what I think we can all tell, it it's not so much about the contract; it's about the way that he was being used.
Mhm.
Um, we saw him wide receiver, running back, returner, just a lot of usage. And for a guy who's looking for his first contract extension, he's thinking about the future. He's thinking about his long term. When you're getting the ball that often and taking it between the tackles, you're going to get hit a lot more often than you would lining up out wide at wide
Mhm.
receiver and running passes. So it's definitely going to be an interesting situation to monitor because he's so dynamic, but a lot of what his value is that he's so versatile. You can use him in different ways. Now, how does the team that's trading for him make sure that they're not overworking him or giving him, you know, too much or whatever he doesn't really want to deal with that he's facing in San Francisco? So it'll be very interesting to see where he goes. His value is high for sure, coming off a fantastic campaign.
And
Um,
well, another thing too is, and I think a big part of not only the usage, but the basically rumored decision that this is now Trey Lance's team and offense, where Jimmy Garoppolo just took him to the Super Bowl a couple years ago in the NFC Championship this year. And by no means am I saying Jimmy G's a Mahomes or Josh Allen or whoever, but clearly the dude is doing enough to manage a game and to put the 49ers in a good position to compete for an NFC championship as well as an NFL championship. So I think, and even Debo even tweeted out when they were like, "How do you beat the Packers?" Or like, that Jimmy G slander. He was like, dude wins, like, and I think that's another big thing that we haven't really considered. But then on the 49ers side, you want to hold on to that because if you are going in with Trey Lance as your starter, you probably want Debo Samuel there to help him out a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if Debo's not there, you've got Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, both of whom have been injury prone. Elijah Mitchell is injured a
Mhm.
lot last year. So, all of this is why Debo was overworked so much. So I completely understand where he's coming from in this regard. I just don't know how realistic it is for him to think that, other teams aren't going to also try to use him the same way because he's a mismatch.
Yeah.
Wherever you line him up, you put him at running back, and the Eagles did this with Devontae Smith a little bit last year. Put him at running back, get a lineup or a matchup on a linebacker, and it's over. They can't cover that guy. They can't keep up with him. So it's matchups. It's a matchup based NFL, and when you have Debo Samuel, you're able to take advantage of a lot more mismatches. So I think that it's going to be an issue for him wherever he goes, but. It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. I really hope the Eagles get him because worked out great last time we
That
Gamecock
is
by Tim.
that is true. That is true. But do you think he'll be traded between now and the end of the draft?
I think so. I feel like if a trade's gonna happen, it's gotta happen before the draft so that the teams, the 49ers getting those assets back, they can use them on a replacement for Debo. The team drafting, now knows what they have to work with and what they've acquired in Debo Samuel. I just think it makes a lot more sense for something like that to get done before the draft and not really during the draft. Because if the draft's underway, you know, the Jets are one of the rumored teams to take
Mhm.
Debo at number 10. They could have their pick of the wide receivers. Um, it doesn't really make as much sense for me to see it happening during the draft when the 49ers are clearly asking for a lot. And, these teams are on the clock and they have their pick of wide receivers or Debo
Mhm.
Samuel, they're probably going to pick their pick of the wide receivers so they can have them under contract and under control for the next 5 years. So I think it's got to happen leading up to the draft. So hopefully soon.
Yeah, I think Debo is going to be staying for now. I do think that maybe they work something out for him to still be a 49er, but I don't think it's going to be happening anytime before the draft or even during the draft. I think Baker Mayfield is more likely to be dealt. You mentioned Carolina and Seattle. I mean, it really depends, and we'll talk about this in a second with the draft. It really depends what Seattle does, right? Because I've heard rumors and smoke screens that they might try to trade back into the end of the first to get a quarterback, or maybe knowing that DK is probably gone, they might be trading him, or they're definitely probably not going to extend him just because they've given Tyler Lockett so much money. Where it's kind of like maybe the Seahawks just wait for a better quarterback class next season, especially given the NFC West, not the easiest of divisions to win. So it's like if you do get Baker Mayfield, it's like is that really going to propel you to be successful in the division and not only this year, but the next 2 to 3 years, especially knowing
No.
DK is not going to likely be there. So I think Baker probably gets dealt. Who like who knows, man? Who knows? But I don't think either of them will get dealt. I think Baker Mayfield is the most likely to get dealt just because it is a quarterback and that's kind of who you build around. But I think you're right, Joe. I think it's definitely going to be a training camp injury where the Browns can take advantage and maybe end up getting a first instead of a second or third for Baker Mayfield because the team is desperate to have somewhat of a quarterback as the starter. So it's going to be interesting to see, needless to say. But Joe, if we were this smart, we would both be NFL GMs, right?
That's right, Tim. That's right. That was the dream growing up. Middle school Joe was gonna he was gonna run the Philadelphia Eagles and maybe even buy the Cowboys, but then just delete the entire franchise. That was my whole dream as a child.
Well, well, that is, hey, the dreams can still happen. Dreams can still
That's
come
right.
true, Joe. But speaking of the NFL draft, that is coming up, and that's going to be a little bit of our conversation. A bunch of teams have multiple picks in the first round. I think like 6 teams have 2 picks, and then 7 teams just don't have a pick. So a lot of teams could be stacking up on some top talent, or maybe you try to get some future picks. I know as a Ravens fan, Eric DeCosta last year, he was like, we need picks, we need picks, we need picks, because eventually you're going to have to pay your young quarterback or your young stud wide receiver, middle linebacker, defensive end, whoever it may be. You're eventually going to have to pay him. So, and even Eric DeCosta last year was like, yeah, we got like 20 picks right now between this year and next year. And we are ready to draft like 35 guys. Like we have our eye on so many people. So that just kind of goes into the work about how you're thinking about this year and next year, like I was saying with that quarterback class. So it's going to be interesting to see if there is going to be a lot of movement or if there won't be. And a team like the Jets and Giants are like, cool, we'll just take 2 top 10 guys. Like, no problem. So it'll be interesting, Joe. And I guess shaking up in that top 10, or man, let's change up that question a little bit. Do you think any quarterbacks are going in the first round? And if so, how many and who?
I think so. I'd say two, and I would say there would be Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett.
Mhm.
Um, I could see that being up to 3 or 4. I've heard that some teams are really high on Desmond Ritter, and he's kind of a first round sleeper. But I could also see it just as easily being zero if the Panthers aren't sold on any of these quarterbacks. If the Seahawks aren't, if a team drafting later like the Steelers doesn't trade up, and I think that number 5 overall spot where the Giants are drafting right before the Panthers, that's a very uh, lucratively potential trade spot for a team looking to move up and get a quarterback that can leapfrog Carolina, potentially drafting one at number 6. So you could see a team like the Steelers come up. I think that would make a lot of sense. Um, there's trying maybe the Saints as well. They just acquired those 2 first round draft picks, so that could be kind of part of their draft strategy here. So I think that number 5 overall pick, the Giants are most likely trying to trade out of that if they can, but it would have to be for a quarterback. So I think that would be the smartest thing that the Giants could potentially do, Tim, and something that I'm definitely keeping an eye on, because if they can pick up another first round pick for next year and kind of hedge their Daniel Jones bet like the Eagles are doing with Jalen Hurts, set themselves up for a couple draft picks next year in a loaded QB class, Giants could be a problem down the road. So that's something that they haven't done in the past, and definitely something I'm keeping an eye on for them trading down and another team coming up for a quarterback.
And it's funny you mentioned the Giants as well with Joe Schoen running the thing now, not Dave Gettleman. I because there are rumors that saying that he wants to trade James Bradbury as well as Kadarius Tony, and very similar to what Billy Bean or Brandon Bean in Buffalo did when he took over. He traded Sammy Watkins, he traded Ronald Darby. So it's a very interesting, similar situation of like, hey, like I want to make sure that these are my guys and not Gettleman's guys. So it'll be interesting to see if even those guys kind of get dealt as well. But the Giants are going to be interesting. Jets are going to be interesting. Let's just start. Jags and Lions. They're not taking quarterbacks. At least the Lions probably aren't at number 2. Maybe at 32 they take one, but not definitely at number 2. Houston seems to be Davis Mills. So I think quarterbacks will be taken. It depends when they'll be taken. I do think Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett will be taken in the first round, but is it going to be, Carolina and Atlanta at 6 and 8, or is it going to be Seattle at 9 with the first quarterback, or is a team going to trade up to 9, 10, 11 to take a quarterback, or is it going to kind of be like a Mac Jones situation where a team like Pittsburgh at number 20, like just all the quarterbacks follow them at 20? So that's the big question is who's going to be that first domino, because even we see it in fantasy drafts sometimes, Joe. Once somebody takes that first quarterback or even that first tight end or whatever, it's a run. And that could
Yeah.
definitely happen this year, where once if Carolina takes a quarterback at 6, or if somebody trades up with the Giants at 5, or maybe even 7, depending on what Carolina does, to get a quarterback, somebody's trading up there at number 8, number 9, number 10, or 11, 12, 13 to go get a quarterback. Once that first domino falls, you'll see that desperation move. But who knows as well, Joe, because this is not the strongest class. So it's
No,
like,
it's not.
if you're a team like Pittsburgh, do you want to give up so much? Definitely probably a first next year to move up 9, 10, 11 spots in this draft to maybe get your quarterback for the next 10 years. So that's the big question for me. But I do think I'm with you. I think Malik Willis and definitely Kenny Pickett are two for sure first rounders. It's just a matter of when. And Desmond Ritter could be one. I mean, he's probably maybe number 3 or number 4 on my quarterback list with Matt Corral. I'm not that big on Sam Howell. We've seen North Carolina quarterbacks, how they do when they don't start a lot. Desmond Ritter, 3-4 year starter at Cincinnati, pretty much won every single game and made some history going to the semifinals. So he's a proven winner, stayed on the field. Matt Corral as well put up amazing numbers this past season. Definitely has that dual threat mentality. So those are probably my top 4. I'm not a fan of Sam Howell at all, Joe. I mean, it's just, and somebody made a good point today that I was reading where it's like, the quarterback class is so weak because look at these colleges: Pittsburgh, Liberty, Cincinnati. It's not like previous years where it's Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State,
Right.
which will happen next year with Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and a few others. So that's also a reason why. But I don't think any quarterbacks are going to go. Ah, man, it's tough, Joe. I don't want to give away my secrets for this mock draft challenge either.
I know.
Uh,
All right. Well, let me ask you then, Tim. Any QBs go in the top 5, or is that
um,
your secret?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. I don't think I definitely not top 3. I don't think, because I think everybody knows Jaguars, Lions, and Texans are not taking a quarterback. So
Right.
no need to try to trade up at 2 or 3 to get a quarterback. Jets, no, they just took Zach Wilson last year. So if they get calls for number 4, I imagine they keep 4 and try to trade 10. Just given that it looks like the Jets might be going with a defensive back or even just a wide receiver like a Drake London, which I would prefer because that's a huge mistake on their part. But if they do
Yes.
go with a Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley, of course, depending on what the Texans do at number 3, because Texans just need every position, but it seems like Davis Mills is the quarterback. So I think the Jets keep 4, maybe try to deal 10 for a quarterback or whatever. And then again, with the Giants, I don't see, based on the first 4 picks, if they're non-quarterbacks, I don't see a team trading all the way up to 5. I mean, maybe if you're Seattle at 9, just to guarantee that you're getting a quarterback, like I'm
I
going to
could
say
see the
no.
Saints. I could see the Saints doing it. I mean,
You can't rule out the Saints. I mean, with they're at 16 and 19 right
16 or
now.
19. Like, again, what is their rationale for making that trade with the Eagles, Tim, where they acquired 2 first round picks? Are they really in win now mode, going all in, trying to surround Jameis Winston with some talent, feeling like they need to get, a Teron Armstead
Mhm.
replacement and a compliment to Michael Thomas so that they could maximize Jameis Winston? I think if you're a team being objective and looking at the Saints, it's clear they're not there yet, and that's not the move for them. That's going to set them up for success in the future. Maybe it gets them an extra win or 2 this year, but long term, I don't think so. And especially no more Sean Payton. This is Dennis Allen's first year. I could really see them, having taken a long look and saying, okay, like Sean's gone, we need to retool. We're not going to have his coaching and play calling ability really helping out our offense. We need a quarterback that we can build around and who's going to make those plays himself. I could see them going up to number 5 and taking Malik Willis out from the Panthers so that they can't get to him.
Yeah, but and then on the flip side, if you're the Saints, maybe they're the opposite. Maybe they're thinking, hey, we're 4-0 against Tom Brady's Buccaneers in the regular season. So it's not out of the question that we can win this division given the tiebreakers and everything. So, I mean, I can see both ways. I can see your situation, but I can also see them being like, cool, we got 2 first round picks. This is like, but then again, you look at the rest of the team
That's what
and
I'm saying. They lost both their
like,
starting safeties. They
mhm,
lost Teron Armstead. Alvin Kamara may be suspended. Sean Payton's gone. Like, this is a team that clearly got worse this offseason. So, again, I get it. Maybe just trying to inject some youth into the roster. But, to give up a first round pick and, not take a quarterback with that, that just seems kind of, it doesn't make sense in terms of the value. And it would be not within the norm for giving up a future first round pick. But like I said, I think on the last podcast, 10, the Saints were the only team to not take a quarterback when they traded up and gave up a future first round pick. And they took Marcus Davenport, pass rusher, who has not worked out for them so far. So they could do something stupid like that again. But I feel like those 2 picks, the value makes a lot of sense there to go from, give up 16 and 19 and go up to 5. And then if you're the Giants, then now you've all of a sudden got 7, 16, and
mhm.
19 right there. I mean, if you're the Giants looking to inject some youth and some juice into that team, that's a very smart way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with the Saints at 16 and 19 as well, maybe if there are no quarterbacks going, and then you're at that like 9, 10, 11 mark, it's a little bit easier to move from 16 up to 10 with the Jets than trying to give up 16 and 19. So I agree with you. I think the Saints are going to be very interesting to see. Just kind of going with the rest of the first round. Carolina, Giants, Atlanta, 6, 7, 8. Carolina could do anything. If I was in charge of Carolina, I might say just go get a guy like Charles Cross or Evan Neal, depending how.
Yeah,
Just saying like, hey, let's get a tackle that we know will be a Carolina Panther
yeah.
for the next
If
10
it's if
years.
it's not a quarterback, I think it's for sure an offensive lineman.
Yeah, yeah, and then just saying, look, if we suck this year, great. Quarterback class is better next year, or maybe Sam Darnold figures it out because he has an offensive line now. I don't know. But like I think offensive tackle, offensive lineman makes the most sense for Carolina. But again, wouldn't be surprised if they were just like, cool, like Malik Willis, Chris McCaffrey, like, let's ride, baby.
Yeah, and if the Giants go offensive line with that number 5 pick, which, if they don't trade out of it, that probably makes the most sense to do. Now Carolina could have their pick of the quarterbacks that they want right there and make that choice, especially if Neil, Cross, and Ike Ekwonu are all off the board at that point, which is a very real possibility. I mean,
Mhm.
I think in the top 5, it's a very real possibility. It could be, you know, 3 offensive linemen and 2 pass rushers. And, I think that would be, if the Panthers don't like this QB class, that would be worst possible scenario for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Giants, we just kind of talked about them at 7. What Atlanta at 8. Now, last year they had 4, and everybody kind of knew that they were taking Kyle Pitts, or at least all the GMs around, just seeing videos in draft rooms being like, yeah, they're taking Kyle Pitts. But at this time last year, Joe, we were all saying, could they take a quarterback? Could they take they could have taken any position, and we all would have been like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. The Falcons. So now you got Marcus Mariota as the starter, of course, coming back to an Arthur Smith offense. So very familiar with that. But does Atlanta take a quarterback here, or do they say, you know what? Let's see what we got with Mariota. Again, kind of like the Panthers. If we suck this year, great. Next year's class is a little bit better. So, what are you feeling with Atlanta here? Because again, you're looking at Carolina. You guys are pretty even right now in the division. You're seeing the Saints, which seem to be on the decline, but Lord knows what's happening down there. And then you got Tom Brady again. So it's like, look, we're probably not winning the division this year unless Tom Brady tears his ACL and all this happens and we just hit a
Yeah.
lucky streak of winning a bunch of close games. So I mean, where do you see Atlanta going with this pick? I don't think it's a quarterback, but maybe a defensive back. Like I don't know how much
I
more you can add to that offense.
I feel like they have to go wide receiver. I mean, they don't have Calvin Ridley for the
That's
entire
mhm.
season. I mean, they got what Olamide Zaccheaus out there, and they lost Russell Gage. Julio's not there anymore. I mean, they don't have anything at wide
Mhm.
receiver. Tim. I mean, they've Kyle Pitt and nothing else in terms of downfield targets. So I think that if it's not a quarterback, then they have to go receiver and take their pick before the run starts.
Yeah, and that could be the first wide receiver taken off, or maybe hey, you know what? Eight's a good spot too to trade back because you're trading right in front of
Right.
Seattle and the Jets and even the Washington Commanders. Now they have Carson Wentz. I don't think that they'll be in the market for a first round quarterback at 11. Maybe they even trade back as well. So Atlanta's in a very good spot where it's like, hey, we're either going to take a wide receiver, which I believe it's still going to be a reach. I would try to trade back because I think this wide receiver class is very good, especially on days 2 and 3. I think it's a very, very deep position, but it's not a top talent. It's not like last year where it was like Jalen
Right.
Waddle, Heisman winner Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase, like Drake London and Garrett Wilson, and some of these other guys. They're like really, really good, but are they like and Joe, my like the Ravens have taken a lot of wide receivers in the first round.
Right.
I am a big
Same.
I am a big person on you do not take a first round wide receiver unless you know for sure that this is a Calvin Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill kind of wide receiver where like I when we took Brashad Perriman, it seemed like it was a project pick. And if he was like the sixth wide receiver ranked out of the six wide receivers projected to go to the first round. Joe, as you know, a couple of years ago, that we won't
I don't
mention
want to
any
talk
names.
about.
We
I don't
won't
want
we
to
won't.
talk about it.
Yeah, but last year made sense because you got the Heisman. Like you knew
Right.
that this is going to be a guy for your team. So that's my philosophy, and I don't think there's any wide receivers in this draft where I'm like, yes, this is the next D Hop, Calvin Johnson, even a guy like an Anquan Bolden. Like I don't think there's that guy, but I think there's a lot of good value there if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, from what I can tell, a lot of the draft experts have said that last year's wide receiver class, the top three guys would all be higher ranked than any of the
Mhm,
guys in this draft. So, I think that makes sense. I think that the 10 to 20 range in this draft is where there's a lot of good wide receivers. Maybe
mhm.
maybe 10 to 25, something like that. I think that's where the run's really going to be. Um, I think there's definitely some difference makers there, but I think it's such an obvious glaring need for Atlanta that
Yeah.
they can't afford to get cute with it. I mean, they don't want to trade down to get an extra, third round pick, and then now they're getting the third or fourth best receiver, coming out when they could have had their pick. So if I'm Atlanta, I'm not sold on the quarterbacks. I'm at least trying to set my quarterback of the future up,
Mhm.
whoever that may be, for success when he comes in. He's already got Kyle Pitts. He's already got the top receiver in this draft. The system and Arthur Smith, everyone's starting to get into place, and now you just plug in the quarterback and you're good to go. I think that's the right way for Atlanta to do it right now, based on uh, kind of where they're at and what options are going to be available for them this year.
Yeah, and I think that could very well be a thing for Houston's second pick as well because yes, it was in a lot of garbage time last year, but Davis Mills put up some pretty decent numbers at least for a rookie quarterback and for the Houston Texans, a team that Joe you thought would not win a game, ended up winning a few. So now with that 13 pick, let's say at number 3 they go with an Evan Neal or Ikwe, I don't want to mispronounce his name, so I'll just say the NC State offensive tackle. So if they go with them at 3, maybe they get a wide receiver at 13, just being like, hey, like, let's build our offense. Davis Mills put up some pretty decent numbers last year. Could he do it again? Who knows? But at least let him set up, or maybe, hey, next year, if you guys suck again, next year's quarterback class is better. So bringing in a Bryce Young or CJ Stroud with arguably one of the best offensive lineman prospects in this draft and maybe even the last couple of years, and a top wide receiver in this draft. Now you're saying, okay, Houston might be a interesting spot to go to now if you are Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, especially with all the collateral and all the picks that they got with Deshaun Watson. So I see if I'm Atlanta, if you want that number one wide receiver in this class, you take him at 8 or you trade before Houston because and also who knows, Houston needs everything. But I don't really see Seattle taking a wide receiver at 9. Jets maybe at 10, depending on what they do at 4. If they make a
I
trade.
think so. Yeah, I think at 10, if they haven't taken a receiver, then that's a spot that receivers could
Mhm,
go. I think the Commanders as well. That's a spot that receiver could go if they don't take a QB. I mean, they need someone alongside McLaurin.
mhm.
Um, and I can't remember who picks 13th, but then I know then we got the
13
Ravens and the
is the
Eagles.
Texans. 13 is the
There we
Texans
go.
from
Okay, yeah.
Cleveland. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so I mean, we got Atlanta, we got the Jets, we got the Commanders, we got the Texans. Like these are a lot of teams that very well could take receivers there. So, if you're a team like the Eagles, who maybe Jamison Williams and the smoke is real, and they want to make sure they can get him, maybe they do move up a couple spots and make sure that they can get their guy. So it's that's going to be a really interesting part of the draft, 10 to 15.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be interesting, and I think Commanders. I mean, even the Vikings at 12, they probably won't be taking a wide receiver because they took somebody a couple years ago. We won't name any names, Joe,
We
but
don't need to talk about him. We don't need to
we
talk about him.
we don't need to talk about them for sure. But then we're getting to 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, where our teams are picking my Baltimore Ravens, and I want quarterbacks, I want wide receivers, I want all of them gone before our pick because I want as many resources as possible. Because sitting at 14, and I've been saying this on Twitter, I'm like, Ravens don't pick here that often, right? We're always a playoff team. We're always picking after 20. Bless you. Bless you again. So
Thank you.
we don't pick here this often. So it's a good opportunity to take somebody like when we picked fifth or sixth a couple years ago, we took Ronnie Stanley. And report today saying he's on track for 2022, which is huge for this draft. But I think we got to go in the trenches. We got to go offensive linemen. If one of these tackles fall to us, why not, dude? Like, if Ronnie Stanley is healthy, great. We got our left tackle and right tackle. If he's not healthy, great. We at least have another tackle. Or the guy that I want, Jordan Davis, baby. Give me that big
Oh
boy from
no.
Georgia, baby. Give me that big boy from Georgia. But then again, also, if a guy like Derek Stingley falls to us, I'm not going to say no to that either. I mean, our defensive backs are very, very good with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. We got Marcus Williams from the Saints. We got Chuck Clark back there. But after that, there's not a lot of depth. I mean, we cut Tavon Young. I believe Anthony Averett left. So there's not a lot of depth. And also, Derek Stingley went up against Jamar Chase every single day for practice. And, Jamar Chase had a couple of decent games against us last year. So if he's there, maybe we take him. But I think for the Ravens, we got to get this defensive lineman. We rarely miss on them, whether it's the first round and a guy like Kalodi Nada or the third or fourth round and a guy like Brandon Williams. We clearly know what we're doing there on the D line. So if we take him, then I know it's going to be a solid career for them. So that's what I hope. But either way, if we get an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, or some sort of edge rusher or a defensive back, if a Stingley or Stoss Gardner or even a McDuffie fall to us, I'm gonna be okay. If we take a wide receiver, if we take a quarterback, that's gonna be a whole episode in itself, Joe. But this one is gonna be in the trenches. I don't think it's gonna be a very sexy draft for the Ravens, but it's gonna be a necessary in the trenches draft for us. So hopefully that's what happens at 14. And we do have a history of trading back. So if there is Sauce Gardner, Jordan Davis, McDuffie, Stingley, maybe even one of these offensive tackles, if you're a team like the Saints at 19, maybe we do trade back and try to see if we can get another pick or two, whether in this draft or next year, just to load up more on picks, because eventually we are going to have to pay Lamar Jackson. Like we are going to give him a contract extension. So the more picks, the better. So if there's 5 or 6 guys on our big board, let's see if we can move back 4 or 5 picks, and then we'll just take whoever's left. Or if a team like Pittsburgh wants to get a quarterback, look, quarterback's not on our big board in the first round. So even if we
Right.
can trade back 5 or 6 picks, I feel pretty good that we'll still be able to get one of those Jordan Davises. Probably won't get past your Eagles, but even a McDuffie or one of these offensive linemen, tackles, centers, whoever, we just need that added depth. So we have a lot of fun and a lot of flexibility at 14. Now, Joe, talk about your Eagles. You got 15, you got 18. Are you going to trade up at all? Are you going to trade back? Or do you think you're saying at 15 and 18, saying, hey, we already made that trade with the Saints. Let's just get 2 really good guys here in the middle of the draft. Or maybe do you try to trade up or trade back? Like, what are your thoughts on the
I
season
I think
draft?
we could do both. We could trade
Mhm.
up from 15, and we could trade down from 18. I mean, you mentioned a lot of guys. Stingley could fall. You know, Kyle Hamilton, we haven't even mentioned
Mm,
his name yet. The top safety in this draft, he could fall. Kayvon Thibodeau, there's talk about him sliding. If you're the Eagles and you really like Jermaine Johnson, go up and get him, the defensive end out of Florida State. Or
mhm.
if you want to jump ahead of the Ravens, make
No.
sure you can get Jordan Davis. I'm all about that too. Or maybe it's a wide receiver. There's a lot. And I think that to me, what makes the most sense is, moving up from 15 if one of those guys that I mentioned who's not a wide receiver is available, because I think that there's still going to be a good receiver available at 18. And if there's not, then that's one you could potentially trade down and get someone later on that, is still a good fit and contributor. But, we got 2 third-round picks from this year since the Saints gave us theirs. So I could see us using one of those third-round picks to move up a couple spots and make sure we can get our guy. Um, you know, Pretty much if we're trading up, a couple spots to get any of those guys I listed, Thibodeau, Jermaine Johnson, Stingley, Hamilton, Jordan Davis, I'm pretty thrilled with any of those, honestly, there, Tim. Now, I'm also fine with us staying at 15 and 18 and just kind of taking the value. I don't want a Drake London. I don't want a Trent McDuffie. You keep mentioning McDuffie. I don't want anything to do with him. I don't need any more Washington corners on the Eagles after Sidney Jones. I don't need any big body possession, contested catch receivers out of the Pac 12 like Drake London, since the Eagles are already converting JJ Arthega Whiteside, big body wide receiver from Stanford. They're converting him to tight end already, Tim. So I don't need to deal with either of those scenarios anymore. But, if I could also see us taking one of the receivers with the other pick. I think that Jamison Williams and Treylon
Mhm.
Burks, those are the 2 guys that I've got my eye on. I really like Treylon Burks. I think he could be a lot like a bigger Debo and just, real good run after the catch, get him the ball on screens, jet sweeps, slants, anything where he can, just get it in space with the ball in his hands and make some plays. He's not a very refined route runner, so that'll take some time, but he's big, he's strong, he's fast. He played at Arkansas, went up against the best, dominated against Alabama this season. So checks a lot of boxes for me, Tim. And then with Jamison Williams, I mean, he averaged almost 20 yards per catch last season.
Mhm.
Just absolute home run hitter of a deep threat. He would be phenomenal. I think he'd be a great fit for any offense. I don't know if I love the fit with Jalen Hurts, who hasn't really shown, excellent deep ball accuracy so far. But when you have an opportunity to add talent like that, you take it and you figure it out from there. So any of those defenders, I'd be fine with us moving up for one of them, waiting and seeing what the value is at 15, and then taking ideally one of those 2 receivers
Mhm.
there, Tim, at 18. I don't love Olave or Garrett Wilson. I think that they're going to be very good receivers, very high end number 2 receivers.
Mhm.
I just don't see them having those physical traits in terms of size or speed that are going to make them a true number 1 receiver. And they might. I mean, Devontae Smith, I think, can become a number 1 as well. But then, if you add a Garrett Wilson or a Chris Olave, it's kind of a couple receivers in that same mold who are smaller, skinny, quick guys, really good route runners, good hands, but not a big body, not a deep threat, not run after the catch. So I'd like a little bit more variety, but at the same time, can't get cute trying to go for fit. That's how you end up with he who must not be named at wide receiver, who we're not going to talk about anymore, Tim. And instead of just going out and getting a baller who, clearly was a baller, but we're not going to talk about that other receiver anymore either, Tim. So, you know, they shouldn't get cute. If it's a good receiver that they have on their board and he's available, take him if he can get open and catch the ball, because ultimately that would be an upgrade over a lot of what the Eagles receivers have been able to do.
Yeah, and that's why I always love the Ravens and our front office, because it seems like we do just take best player available. Like you said, when top talent is there, you take it. And obviously, like I said, we're probably not taking a quarterback, but if the best player available is another offensive tackle or a center or a defensive end or even like a middle linebacker, it's like we're going to take them. We're going to take best player available. we're going to make it work. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the Eagles are doing. Luckily, at 15, you mentioned potentially moving up. You probably don't need to move up that much. It's not like you're going to be going with Atlanta at 8. You're just going to be 10, 11, 12 maybe to get that
Yeah,
Jordan Davis or to get that wide receiver, to get whoever, or that defensive back. So it's not going to be too crazy for you guys to move up. Now, kind of in between this Eagles and Saints sandwich, we got the Chargers, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. They were what, about 45 seconds away from going to the playoffs, and maybe a timeout that shouldn't have been called for making the playoffs. They got J.C. Jackson. They kept Mike Williams. They traded for Khalil Mack. They took Rashawn Slater last year, who was one of the better first rounders last year, one of the better offensive linemen in the league in terms of rookies, of course. So they got their quarterback. They still have Keenan Allen. They still got Mike Williams. They still have Austin Eckler. They bolstered their defense with J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack. They still have Bosa. Like, what are the Chargers going to do, Joe? Like, I can see them trading back just to get a little bit more draft capital. Hey, again, knowing Justin Herbert is going to get paid eventually. So, I mean, maybe not out of the first round entirely, but I can see them getting trading back. But they're probably another team that just takes best player available, whether that is
yeah.
another edge rusher or whether that is maybe a Kyle Hamilton to just bolster that secondary up a little bit. But what are your thoughts on the Chargers? And because, like I said, I mean, they did a lot in free agency and trades and things like that, and they seem like a very complete team. But what do you think they're going to do?
Yeah, I mean, they're a team that's clearly all in right now. I mean, when you have a quarterback on their rookie contract like Justin Herbert
Mhm.
and you can kind of maximize that window, that's when you have your best chance to surround him with an elite roster because you're not paying him as much as you normally would. So I don't see them trading back and really worrying about, when they're going to have to pay Justin Herbert down the road because that's still a conversation 2 or 3 years away. And if they can add a difference maker who can immediately contribute right now, I think that should be their priority to get over the hump in their division and battle with this juggernaut of the AFC West right now. So I think that could be a wide receiver, that could be an offensive lineman, that could be a defensive lineman. If Jordan Davis is somehow still there, he could make a lot of sense, be a really good fit in that Brandon Staley defense. Or his teammate Deontay Wyatt, the other Georgia defensive tackle, a little bit more ready to play right now. He could be a good fit there too. Or it could be a linebacker like N'Kobe Dean or Devin Lloyd. I could see a lot of different ways for the Chargers to attack this, but I think it will ultimately be best player available and who can come in and make a difference and contribute right away in a meaningful way, not a depth piece or a developmental piece. They're just not in that mode right now because their window is here and they need to
Mhm.
maximize it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And then we talked about the Eagles and the Saints. Next kind of batch of teams, we got the Steelers, Patriots, Packers, and Cardinals. Certainly, the Packers do not need a quarterback. The Patriots do not need a quarterback. Cardinals don't need a quarterback right now, but that could be a conversation in the next year or two, depending on the Kyler Murray situation. Steelers seem to be taking a quarterback, and if one falls to them at 20, I say they go ahead and take it. But let's say Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis are off the board at 20, and it's a Steelers pick. I think it's a reach to kind of go anybody else right now at
Yeah.
20. So it's like, do they just go best player and just being like, hey, there's a lot of great value. We signed Mitchell Trubisky, who has been to the playoffs, especially with a very good defense in Chicago. And we saw a lot of improvements last year, especially being in a Buffalo Bills offense. So I think Trubisky can do just as good. So do the Steelers just kind of take that best player available? What do you think the Steelers would do, assuming no Malik Willis, no Kenny Pickett?
I think it would have to be between quarterback, or I'm sorry, wide receiver and offensive line,
Mhm.
just depending on, what the value's there. If one of the top receivers has fallen and that's the best player on your board, I would go ahead and slot him right in. I mean, you lost Juju, so
Mhm.
and I think did James Washington get traded? Um,
I
I
have
know he
no
was he
idea.
had requested a trade, but so I mean, you got Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, and not a whole lot else. So I think wide receiver makes a lot of sense there. But again, offensive line. I mean, it was a disaster
Yeah.
last season. They've got to inject some youth into there and inject some talent into that position unit. So if that value is right there as well, that's a route I would go. other than that, I feel like those two and quarterback are really the three main positions I'm thinking about from the Steelers and looking at this draft.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going offensive line, just because the Steelers are very, very good of drafting wide receivers day two, day three, and developing them. So they know what they're doing with wide receivers, much like a Ravens with defensive linemen. The Steelers know what they're doing. I think offensive tackle, especially when you spent a first round last year on a running back in Najee Harris, we saw flashes of his talent, but that offensive line was brutal. How many games did we see 21 carries, 60 yards from Najee Harris?
Yeah.
So I think offensive line. Patriots, like it's Bill Belichick, man. Like whoever they pick, I'm gonna be like, yeah, sure, that's a a Patriot kind of guy. I don't,
Unless it's a wide receiver.
I don't think it's a wide receiver here, Joe. Yes, Mac Jones does need a couple more weapons looking at that Patriots offense, but there's not that like they're just not there this year. Patriots haven't done a great job at first round wide receivers with guys like N'Keal Harry. So Patriots, I'm sure they're just going to draft some like defensive stud that Bill Belichick's going to turn into like a
Oh,
perennial
you
Pro
you know
Bowler.
you know who they're
Like,
gonna take, Tim. You know exactly who they're gonna take. A stud defensive player that everyone's gonna have passed on, and then be like, "How did we let this guy go to the Patriots and Bill Belichick?" N'Kobe Dean,
yeah, yeah,
linebacker, Georgia. I mean,
arguably the best player from that defense last year.
exactly the captain, and he's the leader. I mean, he's got all the intangibles like size. He's just not as tall, but he could be the next Jonathan Vilma. With his instincts and Bill Belichick's defense, I think that Belichick would love him and see him as a Dante Hightower replacement for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like that. Packers. This is the Devontae Adams pick. They could go wide receiver just to replace somebody. I could see them just going offensive line just to keep Aaron Rodgers protected and bolster up that running game a little bit. Or they can go defense as well. I mean, defense was also an issue. I mean, look at their playoff game. It was offense being the issue, but they can really do anything. Cardinals, I'm probably offensive line for the Cardinals. I mean, you got the
I'd,
weapons.
I'd say probably pass rush. I mean, they just lost Chandler Jones. I think that at this point in the draft, you're not getting, those difference makers in terms of, the top end pass rush talent. But there's there's like Boye Mafe out of Minnesota,
Yeah.
and there's a Arnold Etbieke or something like that out of Penn State. There's a couple talented pass rushers to be had at the end of the first round that can contribute like a Joe Tryon last
Hmm.
year for the Buccaneers. So I could that's kind of a route that I could see the Cardinals going just because they absolutely need that so much. But also with this Kyler Murray drama, maybe they pander to Kyler Murray, take another receiver to replace Christian Kirk, go offensive line, try to protect him. I don't really know. I mean, Cardinals are also kind of all over the place. And I feel like at this point in the draft, like, we're really just talking about value, like who falls. Like, a lot of these teams could use a wide receiver. And I'd say there's, you know, 5 or 6 wide receivers that I'd say should go in the first round between let's see, Traylon Burks, Drake London, 2 Ohio State wide
Hmm.
receivers, Jamison Williams, right there. Am I forgetting anyone?
I mean, there's a few wide receivers, and so
I know
yeah,
there's some other guys
Cardinals
like
can really do whatever. If they went with any defensive position, I'd be like, yeah, sure. Like, or if they went anything but quarterback, I'd be like, yeah, sure. So we'll see what they do. Joe, now your favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys, what do you want them to do as an Eagles fan? And then what do you think they're going to actually end up doing?
oh man. Well, I I haven't thought about what I want them to do as an Eagles fan because I feel like their implosion has already kind of begun. I don't want them to take offensive line, but I think that's what they will do, and I think that's where the value will be. It would be interior offensive line. I think that from what I've seen, a lot of mocks have Zion Johnson out of Boston College and the offensive lineman out of Texas A&M, Kenyon Green.
Well, there's
Um,
also, I mean, with Tyler like Lindebaum from the center from Iowa, like that's I mean, it's a center, but it's still an interior lineman.
Potentially,
Yeah,
I think they like the center they got a couple years ago, Tyler Biadasz, I think, out of Oregon, or I'm sorry, out of
Wisconsin, I believe.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes. I think they like him. I think that it's the guard spots that they really need some help at. So I think that would be kind of the smarter thing to do. I could also see them going wide receiver. I guess that would be my preference to see them reach on a wide receiver if
Mhm.
all five of those receivers are off the board and they just, reach on someone, inexplicably. That would be hilarious. Um, I'm trying to think. Running back would be amazing. That would crack me up. I could also see a linebacker again,
Yeah.
Tim. That would also be ridiculous and just a very poor use of resources again. After again, Micah Parsons, he was absolutely a difference maker last year, but you know, Micah Parsons, Sean Lee, uh,
Van
Jalen
Der Esch.
Smith, Van Der Esch. If they took a Devin Lloyd or a N'Kobe Dean, we're talking five linebackers with first or second round draft picks over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, that's unreal. So that would be hilarious to me. That's probably what I'd like to see, a linebacker.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. And then next up we got Bills and then Titans. Bills, somebody on defense, maybe. Like I feel like they got offense kind of down. There's definitely not a first round running back for them to take. Maybe they just go with offensive line depth and take one of these guards or even that center. Who knows? But after watching that playoff game last year, Joe,
Why do you say there's not a first round running back?
there
I
isn't.
mean, I agree. I don't think there ever really is, but I think for a team like the Bills, it could be a luxury pick. I mean, again, what hole do they have that they need to fill? You know, and
Yeah,
and what's the
yeah,
value there? I mean, if you can get the best running back in this draft, a Brees Hall, that's a difference maker for sure. That's an upgrade over Devin Singletary, no doubt. And you can have your pick of them. I think that I wouldn't hate that pick. I don't love the philosophy of running
yeah.
backs in the first round, especially early. But if you're a team drafted towards the end of the first round and you can have your pick of the running backs and you're already, kind of set everywhere else except that, and you're trying to get over the hump, I can definitely get on board for that. Like, when the Chiefs took Clyde Edwards-Helaire a couple years ago, hasn't really worked out for them so far,
Mhm.
but at the time, everyone was like, "Oh my God, we just let Clyde Edwards-Helaire go to Andy Reid and the Chiefs offense.
That's
You know,
fair,
that's
especially with that
another
fifth
weapon."
year,
So
especially with that fifth year of player control. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. But again, just seeing now again, I don't think any like the Chiefs defense wasn't even stopping the Bills offense in that game. But maybe just I mean, and again, who knows if
they need a corner.
yeah, if somebody falls to them, sure,
Yeah,
or
Trent
maybe
McDuffie. That's a fine spot for him. Sure,
yeah,
sure. Let him
or
go there.
or maybe, hey, you know what? If a team in the early second is trying to trade back into the first to maybe take a quarterback, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills, because like you said, like where aside from maybe getting a better running game, it's like where's that room for improvement? So if you move from 25 to like 34, 35, one of the first couple of picks in the second round, it's like where's the difference there? So I don't know. Tennessee as well. Like I mean, Tennessee is probably going to go defense, right? Like or
I
if,
think there's another team that could go receiver. I mean, who do they have opposite AJ Brown, who's now in somewhat of a contract dispute? I mean, the Julio experiment did not work out for them. They have to have some weapons. If
yeah,
AJ Brown gets injured again, who do they have out there? Like it was like that old Rams wide receiver. I don't even remember. Geez, it was like a no name. So, they got to get some guys out there. So I think that could be a spot where we see a little bit of a reach on wide receiver as well, assuming all five of the receivers have
no,
already
they
gone
got
off the
Robert
board at this
Woods.
point.
That's who it was.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, so
So
they got
yeah,
AJ Brown, Robert
yeah.
Woods, Nick Westbrook, Akeen, Austin Hooper, tight end, Jeff Swaim at tight end as well. I could see them going wide receiver, but I mean, I'm looking at their defense now and like all these names, I'm like, these guys should be really, really good. And last year they just kind of weren't for a good portion of the season. So defense could make sense just to again stock up on defensive players. Wide receiver could also make sense, but again, maybe at this point, if five or six wide receivers go, it's like, should we reach on one? Like, it's going to be interesting with the Bills and Titans. I think the Titans are still in the decline. So the fact that they're picking this late in the first round is good news for them. Packers are again at 28. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 27. They got Tom Brady coming back, so that's a big help. Do they get him just another weapon? Do they bolster that offensive line? I mean, they re-signed a couple of people. Joe, what do you think the Buccaneers are going to do, especially with Tom Brady returning? They got Kyle Trask last year in the second round, so it's not like they need a quarterback per se. Do they go defense? Do they bolster up that secondary that was super injured last year? Do they just go with pass rush? Like, what do you think the Buccaneers are going to be doing?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think that that secondary makes a lot of sense. I think at this spot in the draft, they can get in on that next tier of safeties and corners
Mhm.
that are going to be available. You know, like a Lewis Sign, I think out of Georgia, Daxton Hill, maybe if he's still there, out of Michigan. Um, Andrew Booth out of Clemson. You know, McDuffie could still be there as well. You know, there's I think that's a good spot in terms of the value and the availability of secondary players who can contribute. I think they're pretty good on the D line. They're set at linebacker. You know, maybe if they like one of the next tier of wide receivers, to kind of replace Antonio Brown and help out while Chris Godwin's coming back from injury. Um, you know, yeah, maybe offensive line. Like again, at this point, it's really just value. But I think that secondary, that's a spot where the value is going to match up with need where they're picking in the draft.
Yeah, yeah. And again, you have Tom Brady, so you really can't go wrong unless you do take a quarterback. We know what that happens when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers and you take a first round quarterback. And then a couple more teams here. Kansas City Chiefs pick 29th and 30th back to back for the Tyreek Hill trade with that the Dolphins got that pick from the 49ers as well. And then they're at 30th, their original pick. So are they going to try to make a move to trade up, or are they going to maybe trade back for, again, a team early second to maybe swoop in, get a quarterback? Or do they just stay and pick back to back players? I mean, again, kind of like the common theme here with teams like the Buccaneers or the Bills, it's like they got a pretty solid roster in Kansas City. So do they just go best player available and just say, hey, we're the Chiefs, whether that's a wide receiver, an offensive tackle, a linebacker, an edge rusher, a safety, like we're going to make it work. So what do you think the Chiefs are going to do here with these two picks?
Yeah, I think that if we see, receiver fall that they could like,
Mhm.
then that's when we could see them kind of package those picks and move up and maybe go get their guy that they feel strongly about. If they don't, I think that pass rush remains a pretty big need for them. I mean, Chris Jones is great, but in terms of an edge rusher, Frank Clark has really fallen off. They don't really have a lot else there. So, could be, a Kingsley Enagbari. It could be in the other later defensive ends that I mentioned earlier in the Penn State and Minnesota pass rushers. Um, and it could be their reach on wide receiver there as well. So again, a couple different routes that they could go. It could also go secondary. Like I said, I think that's a good spot in the draft where there's going to be good value there for a lot of good secondary players towards the back half of the first round, early second. Um, so really just I'm never going to be surprised though with Andy Reid and Brett Veach
Mhm.
what they do. I mean they make a lot of swings, and I wouldn't be shocked if they pick someone that the consensus isn't really thinking as a first round pick. Maybe they really like that Christian Watson out of North Dakota State University, and pair him with Patrick Mahomes. What do you know? He's a stud. Like I wouldn't be shocked really a lot of different ways that the Chiefs could go.
It's going to be interesting. And then now 31, we get the AFC champion, Cincinnati Bengals. Believe it or not, still feels weird to say that. Well, they got some good weapons on offense. They got some elite wide receivers just mixed in a group. They got Joe Burrow. They got a solid running game with Joe Mixon. Last year, people were saying it's either going to be Chase or maybe Panay Sewell. Their defense did great with Hendrickson, everything like that. This to me sounds like offensive line. To me, that is probably their biggest need is to bolster up, protect Joe Burrow, especially because we saw in the Super Bowl. Well, he wasn't very much protected throughout the whole playoff run. I guess it has to be offensive line here, but at 31, like maybe they hope somebody falls to them. Like
This could be Linderbaum.
that could be it. Could be Lindenbaum, and like with Jamar Chase, I think the Bengals are still going to be a good team. So, but I would be shocked if they didn't go offensive line here, whether it's a tackle, center, guard, whoever. It's got to be an offensive lineman, right?
Well, they did add a couple different guys in free agency and trades. So I think that, maybe in their mind it's not as huge of a glaring need as it was. I think they would like to go offensive line, but again, I mean, you just can't bank on that and then, all the offensive linemen are gone. You're just going to take the next highest one on your board. What if you got a third round grade on him? You're taking them at the back half of the first round when, there's some secondary players or defensive linemen that, can contribute now. I mean, they could definitely still use some more juice to their defense. I feel like it kind of overachieved last year. They were coached really well, played really hard, had great chemistry. Why is Eli Apple still starting though? Is that really the best that they can do? I think that they could get someone there at corner and plug in and be an upgrade over him for sure at the end of the first round. So I it's just so hard to say when we get into the later ends of the first round. Um, it's just so tough to say what that value is going to look like.
And then finally, to wrap up, we got the Detroit Lions taking the 32nd pick of the first round with the Rams and the Matt Stafford trade. Do they take a quarterback? Because they have 32 and what, 34 or 35? So
Yeah,
are they taking a quarterback this year, Joe, or are they just going to try to stock up, see how they do with Jared Goff, and then look ahead to a better class next year? So what's the Lions going to do here at 32? And we can even dip into their second round pick of about 34, 35.
yeah. I mean, I could see this being a trade down. Because they have that other pick at 34. Um, I I could kind of see them taking a quarterback at 32 if they like a Matt Corral,
Mhm.
if they like a Desmond Ritter, and they think they'd be an upgrade over Jared Goff. I just, I've talked about this before. My philosophy with quarterbacks, especially if you're going to wait until the end of the first round and take a value quarterback pick when you could have had him at number three, then you obviously don't feel that strongly
Mhm.
about him. So if you don't feel strong enough about any of these quarterbacks taking number three overall, I wouldn't take one at the end of the first round. But that still doesn't mean that they won't do it. If
Yeah.
they think that they can pull it off and get that value and a good win out of it. But I wouldn't like it if they did. So I'm gonna lean no. I'm gonna lean they trade down from 32 with someone.
All right. All right. Well, Joe, we're at about an hour here, so just want to have a quick couple of questions. First one is, as we mentioned, there's a bunch of teams that don't have a first round pick. Do you think any of them will try to trade back into the first round this year? Of course, I don't know the details of how many pick. Obviously, the Rams probably aren't because they don't have any draft picks. But maybe a
Right.
team like Chicago with a new front office, or maybe a team like Denver. Yes, they did get Russell Wilson, but maybe do they just try to say like, yo, we got to go all in now that we got Russell Wilson. Maybe even the Colts, Dolphins. Do you see any of these teams trying to get back into the first round? I would assume probably later in the first, given that all the capital that they have. But do you see any teams that don't have a first round pick trying to get back into the first round?
Yeah, like you said, the teams are kind of in win now mode. If there's a
Mhm.
guy that they think that they have to have that can be a difference maker for them, you know, you mentioned the Broncos, the Dolphins. I think those two make a lot of sense. Um, the Colts, I think, could, but I just don't think they have the capital.
Mhm.
I think they have like the least amount of capital to be able to do that. I don't really see the Bears doing much at all. The Bears are just so irrelevant to me right now. It's hard to even really think about them. I
Yeah.
forgot that they even had a draft pick at all, Tim. Um, trying to think, like I don't even remember who else are the other teams that don't have the
I
first
mean, the
round picks.
Rams
You
have
mentioned
like
the
a fifth
Rams, but
fifth round and like a
yeah,
sixth round. So like,
yeah. I don't think the Rams are doing anything. I could see the Broncos. I think the Broncos that could be one that makes sense. I mean, they're a team that like in that division for sure. Not only are they in win now, but they're in like have to like be really good now.
yeah.
Like
And
just to get
same
out
for
of
the
their division.
Raiders. They traded
Yeah,
for
there you
Devontae
go.
Adams. I could see them hopping back in. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears do, but I think it would be very unlikely. Next little quick question here: who is one guy that you're seeing that you're thinking is going to fall a lot? For me, that's going to be Kyle Hamilton. I think he could be falling into the second half of the first round, maybe in this 20s area, just because again, kind of like wide receivers with safeties, it's like unless you're getting your Ed Reeds, your Palomalos, I'll include Brian Dawkins. Unless you're getting
Yeah,
this
come on.
guy, I don't see the need to take somebody this. I mean, Chuck Clark, one of the better safeties in the league, 6th round pick. I mean, if you look at some of these safeties in the league, not a lot of them were ranked up high. I mean, Buda Baker's doing very, very well. So I think Hamilton is a guy for me that I could see going in that second half of the first round. Now, who's a guy on your, I guess, big board at Joe who you could really see falling beyond what a lot of people are projecting?
Yeah, well, on your Kyle Hamilton point, I hope he doesn't fall to the second half of the first round because if he's available at 15, the Eagles should sprint up and make that pick. I would love that for sure. Um, I think Kayvon Thibodeau is one
Yeah.
that he could potentially fall out of the top 10 altogether. There's been a lot of rumblings about that recently. Stingley is also one that has kind of fallen because his tape the last couple of years wasn't as great compared to his 2019 tape for LSU. But I think that both of those guys will still be top 15 picks. Um, I wouldn't be shocked if the linebackers, N'Kobe Dean and Devin
Mhm.
Lloyd, fall out of the first round altogether. I think that Albert Breer today, in like his Football Monday post, he said that the linebackers falling out of the first round could be something to watch, as well as George Karlaftis, the defensive end out of
Oh,
Purdue, who's been very highly widely regarded as a first round pick. Very good pass rusher, so I think that would be a pretty big surprise. Um, you know, outside of that, no, I think that should be it. That's all I got right here too.
all right. Two more questions. Two more questions. All right. The next question is: what is going to be your biggest splash of a news story on Thursday night for round one? Is it going to be some big trade where a team goes from like 22 to 6? Is it going to be a big trade? Is it going to be a big surprise pick? Is it going to be a Laramie Tunsil video? What's going to be your biggest splash slash newsworthy thing come Thursday night?
Well, I would love for the Eagles to trade up and trade down. Like I said, I think
Mhm.
that'd be best case scenario to give up an asset and then recoup that asset moving back. But I think that scenario with the Saints I mentioned earlier, them packaging their picks to move up to number 5 and take a quarterback, I
Mhm.
think that's one that really has some legs, and I think that's probably the one that I'll go with if I had to choose.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because I want to predict so many trades. I think there's going to be some outside of picks and trades. I think there's going to be maybe not a Laramie Tunsil video, but I think there's going to be some where it's like, why is this guy falling? Why is this guy falling? Why is this guy falling? And then something happens outside of the draft or something that GMs know, maybe even with the Kayvon Thibodeau type of player. So I think one of the biggest news stories will not be the picks or the trades themselves, but something else that maybe cause somebody to fall or maybe cause somebody to rise or whatever. I don't know. So that'll be my big thing. And final question, Joe, who's your number one pick?
Jordan Davis, Tim, that's who I want. That's who I
Oh, I
want
meant number
so
one
bad.
overall. Number one. Who are the
Oh
Jaguars
man,
taking number one?
who the Jaguars taking? Whoops. Jordan Davis. Damn it, not. I think it's Hutchinson. I think it's got to be Hutchinson. I mean, let's not overthink this. There's a report today that Trent Baalke loves Trayvon Walker, the DN from Georgia,
Yeah,
while Shad Khan
he is
loves.
now the favorite. He like I was reading that all the sports
Yeah,
books took him as the favorite now.
I just think it's smoke. I think it's still got to be Hutchinson. I mean, that would, if you're the Lions, you're thrilled if Hutchinson is there at
Yeah.
number 2. I mean, Michigan player at his caliber at that position for he's such a good fit for Dan Campbell. I think that would be a match made in heaven. So I kind of hope that happens. Um, but I feel like the Jags would be stupid to pass on him. But I could also see Doug Peterson, wanting offensive line. That was a big thing for us in Philly. So I could see him kind of pushing for that. But then these Trayvon Walker odds, changing, that just kind of throws a wrench in things. So I'm just going to stick with Aiden Hutchinson, stick with the original projection, and you know, hopefully the Jacks don't overthink this, but I'd be fine if they do.
Yeah, I'm going to go against Hutchinson. I'm going to go with the NC State offensive tackle. Protect your franchise quarterback. So I think that's where they're going to go. I think this is all smoke screens with Walker, even Hutchinson as well. I mean, there's going to be some decent offensive linemen day 2 and day 3, no doubt about it. But there's a difference between getting one of the best tackles in this draft and then getting somebody on day 2, especially if you are a team like the Jaguars. So I'm going to go with that pick, a little bit of a little sexy pick, I guess. So I'm going to go with that. Joe, any final thoughts on the NFL draft before we close out here?
Man, once again, shout out my stupid little brother graduating from college during the NFL draft. I'll be missing rounds 4 through 7, watching him walk across the stage, get a piece of paper, looking like a goon. So, shout out you, John Michael. I'll be watching the draft on my phone while you walk across. I'm not taking a picture of
Hey,
you.
I love that. Congrats to John Michael again. Guys, make sure you join our mock draft challenges. Hit one of us up on Twitter. We'll definitely send you all that information and then your payments and everything like that. And best of luck to those of you who are doing it. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Thank you for watching this episode of the Flea Flicker. We will definitely be back at the end of the draft to kind of do our recap and, reactions and things like that. So, guys, Joey D, it's him right there. I'm Timmy B. Enjoy the draft, folks. Best of luck to your team. May you take whoever you personally want or whatever. So best of luck to everybody's teams in the draft. Hopefully the teams that you hate take positions that you want. So like Joe, Cowboys taking wide receivers, Steelers taking quarterbacks and shit. Like, I don't know. So best of luck to all your teams and not a lot of luck to the teams that you don't like. But guys, we will see you again soon. Peace out.